You're listening to Mark of the Maker. Hey everybody, I'm Mark Steiner and you're listening to Mark of the Maker. And this is episode 71 of the show. We have a great guest with us today. It'll be a fun conversation. Let's make sure we have the whole crew here with us today. I think we got everybody. We have Mr. Sean Kendrick.
Hey.
And we have Mr. Tom Crine.
Hello.
And we have Mr. Michael Birch.
Here.
7th grade, off in the corner, during attendance. Mm-hmm. So this episode, we're doing an interview thing, and maybe there's a little bit of history in here as well. I think we're going to get filled on some historical details about an interesting company. We have Mr. Tim Reeve. Tim, thanks for joining us on Mark of the Maker.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is great. Yeah, love the show, and yeah, great to be here.
Do you take back calling us the old guys?
Yeah.
So I just got off the phone with Harsey, Bill Harsey, a second ago. Bill, I got to run. I'm on the Mark of the Maker podcast, and he's still getting up with this podcast stuff. And I very delicately, again, kind of described you guys as the most mature knife podcast out there. And he goes, well, but why would we want that? You know,
right?
I'm not 100% sure that's accurate.
So no, I think I described you guys as the NPR of knife podcasts or something like that. But in a good way, and so maybe I do take it back. I don't know. I haven't got any threats from you guys yet, and I mean it all in like a good way.
No, we clearly haven't forgotten. That's all I'm pointing out. That's all.
Hey, that's fair. You know, forgive but don't forget, something like that.
I'm just a man whose intention.
Right. Yes. We are old guys, so we can't deny that part.
I love it.
Yeah, but we got our own thing. At least we're trying to do that. So,
yeah, we're glad you're here.
Yeah.
No, I'm happy to be here. It's cool to see all the different styles of the podcast, you know.
For sure.
You guys definitely have a good style, and I like the content that you have because it's very diverse, like all sorts of different people, and I've listened to a handful of different episodes, and you guys do a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you
much. All right, so we got to talk a little bit here at the beginning about some folks we need to thank. We have some very helpful people who support us on Patreon. They send us a little bit of money every month. It's super, super helpful for us to keep this thing going. As Tim knows, we ship microphones, a few of them now, around the country as like the way we get this thing done. And we have some equipment costs because occasionally they die. Sorry, Rachel, about your microphone, and other stuff. So, you know, that helps cover the cost of that stuff and website. And there's a bunch of things that happen behind the scenes that make this thing all come together, and we couldn't do it without the support of our folks on Patreon. So thank you very much to all you guys out there who help us with Patreon. If you're not part of that and would like to support the show, you can go to Patreon, patreon.com, and search for Mark of the Maker, and we come right up, and there's a bunch of different levels of support that you can pledge to the show, and so that's our beg for cash up front. But we do appreciate everyone, and we couldn't do it without you. Tom, you want to thank another piece of the puzzle for us?
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to George over at American Metal Exchange. If you guys need titanium, zirconium, Damasteel, stainless steel Damascus, all sorts of other stuff, he's the place to go. I personally use him, and I think most of the other guys do too. You can find him at amxinc.com. amxinc.com.
See, you did it like a pro, buddy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
well
the second
done.
time around.
Whatever it takes, pal. We got the business out of the way. We're going to get moving here. So we got to talk about Chris Reeve Knives and Tim's part in that and kind of how he got involved in the business, maybe a little bit of Chris Reeve Knives history, if he will be willing to entertain us on some of that. There's some old school stuff that we're dorks about that we like. Mm-hmm. And so we probably want to talk about some of that stuff. And then, and then kind of through that transition and your involvement and how you got into it and kind of what your own background is. And then kind of what's happening today and maybe a little bit of how the industry's changed over the last few years. Cause I think it has for most of us. So
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah.
So Chris Reeve is your dad.
He is my dad. Yep.
Nice.
Yep. since I've joined the company, many people have realized or have said, "Yeah, you've proven you're definitely not adopted." So anyway, my old man.
Wow.
I never know quite what they're saying about that. I take it as a good thing. Same,
Yeah.
like, but I do. I actually kind of like that. It's like, okay, oh, cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, there's something for real about that, right? That's like people can see a lineage that matters, especially in this kind of business, I think.
It does. And I don't want to call it rare, but in some ways it is. I mean, as the world gets bigger and bigger and there's just so many more companies being created and founded all the time. To have like a little bit of a bloodline is kind of cool. It's something a little bit different.
Absolutely. Okay. So I think a lot of people, probably many of our listeners, know kind of some of the very, very basic timeline stuff on Chris Reeve knives. Maybe can you give us kind of an overview for folks who might not be familiar? Because we got everybody. We got knife makers and new people and OGs, and we got everybody.
Yeah. So currently, Chris Reeve Knives is here in Boise, Idaho. We've been in business since 1984. Chris founded the company in South Africa. He started making custom knives in the late 70s into the early 80s. January 1st, 1984, he said, "Hey, I gotta make a real gig out of this." And so that's when the company was founded. And then we kicked this all into fast forward a little bit, but met my mom a handful of years later. Basically she said, "Hey, that cash that you're putting in your pocket and like paying with groceries, like, put it in the bank and like write it down." Basic bookkeeping type stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And we all kind of understand that from starting off as a knife maker from scratch. It's like that first cash you don't really know what to do with. You put it in your gas tank or what. Anyway, so from there, she took the front end of the house. He took the back end of the house. By 1989, they did a handful of shows over here in the States. They do the New York Custom Show. They do the Guild shows, Solvang Show. I could be missing a couple, but they come over a couple times a year. So that'd be through 86 and 87, 88. And then 89, they finally said, "Hey, let's move. We got to get out of South Africa." A beautiful country over there, but the government is, it's got a lot of problems, a lot of corruption over there. And so Chris was born in the wrong time period. I always say he should have been in the Wild West in Montana or Idaho or something like that. So he landed in the right state, but like 100 years too late or something. He should have had 6 guns and rode a horse or something. He just would have loved that, less people. But yeah, so we ended up in Boise, Idaho because of a dealer that we had at the time was out of here. And so my folks came over and visited him and just fell in love with Boise. And I think they were looking between Phoenix, LA and Boise and ended up on Boise. They like the 4 seasons, which is nice. Yeah.
So that move from South Africa to the U.S., political stuff, business stuff, sounds like maybe there was a combination of things. Maybe was a majority of the sales, I assume, were in the U.S. or growing fast here?
Yeah. Like, 99% of what they made went out of South Africa and 90% went to the United States. And they really followed the classic American dream. They are the very quintessential American immigrants looking for a better life. Came over with next to nothing. I mean, and my mom can speak to this a lot better. But I mean, they fit everything they had into the back half of a shipping container.
Oh wow.
They'd been shipping even some bundles of blanks to various friends in the United States. And around the world, back in those days, they were doing pretty much. I think all they were doing was one-piece knives, the hollow-handled one-piece knives. Yeah. And so they shipped a bunch of blanks to all sorts of different people in the States because they could only bring so much cash into the States, or really they could only take X amount of cash out of South Africa, and it was like a piddly amount of cash. It was not a lot. Trying to get the least amount of stuff to move, and so they had all these like blanks kind of stashed around the States that they could start working on when they showed up. Hey, ship them to us. Now we can start making knives again. That kind of thing. So there's because I know with the one-piece knives, they're highly collectible now. And if it has the made in RSA, which is made in the Republic of South Africa stamp on it, they're highly valuable. And so some of them, we actually found one the other day that was started in South Africa and finished in the United States.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, kind of cool stuff.
Yeah. So that was the primary business at the time. And how would you describe the business then? Like a low volume production, or more of like a semi-custom thing, or batch production, or how would you describe it?
Probably low volume production blended with batch production.
Okay.
Yeah, Chris pretty quickly left the full custom days, or tried to move away from them as quickly as possible, I guess. He'd sprinkle custom knives in there throughout, basically till 2014. He'd sprinkle custom knives, and 14 not 14. A couple years before that, he did his last custom knife.
Okay.
2012, something like that. Anyway, but yes, it was. So they had a nice little system where a good friend of ours named Eddie, he ran a tool room in South Africa, a couple towns over, and he would make the blank. The hollow handled one piece knives are turned out of one monolithic piece of A2 tool steel. I think the very early ones he had some D2, but settled on A2 because it was readily available. We used to get it from Bowler back in the day. Anyway, so they'd take a piece of round bar, and a giant Morisiki mill turn lathe would come in and drill the hole, bore out the hole in the back, thread it, knurl the handle, the gist of the cross guard, and then the big rectangle blade blank and flatten it. And it was pretty rough and pretty crude. So they would essentially, from there, it was all the finishing work, refining it, making sure it was nice. Any of the stamps, the CR logos, the made in logos, and then all the various blade shapes. And we still have, in our hand grind room here at the shop, we still have the original, the patterns, right? So you'd set it on top and then scribe around it to,
yeah.
Okay, are we making it this way? A shadow, whatever, or a clip point or whatever.
Yep.
And then from there, finishing. So they would hand file all the thumb serrations, because jimping's not a word, and hand file all the actual serrations and swedges. I mean, all that kind of stuff. And then my mom actually coated, KG gun coated the knives for the longest time. She always jokes that she made black fingernail polish popular before all the goths did.
Wow.
Because those are days before you use gloves. It's like gee whiz. So.
Wow.
Yeah. So I would say like small batch run to a degree, but really production in a small sense.
Yeah. So he was hand grinding knives at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We only started to play with CNC grinding hollow grinds in 2004. No, early 2001, 2002.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Lots of elbows to elbows, like guys on grinders and just ripping through a lot of steel.
Oh yeah.
So and then to finish the story real quick, I guess. So 1989, they immigrated over here into the States to Boise, and then I was born in 1991. And
nice.
Basically, it's just uphill from there.
All right. So you're born here after the move.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay.
It's just funny because I became a citizen before they did, right? So it took them quite a while to naturalize it. So I got to like neener for like the first 10 years of my life.
There you go.
That kind of thing. So,
that always goes well with the parents.
Yeah, we got to hold something over them, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's those early hollow handled knives. We've talked about them a bunch on the show.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But they're just beautiful. They're so badass.
They are.
I still get a kick out of them.
Yeah.
I love them. I would love to see you guys make another one.
Me too.
With the live action CNC stuff that's available now.
Yeah, that was kind of the thing for the longest time was, so we stopped taking orders on the one piece knives in 2009. I think finished the backlog of them in 2010. And we moved into the full tang, micarta handled, green beret knives, the style that we make right now. I think you call it a full tang or skeleton tang or whatever. So that's our method now. But man, I would love to make them again. I get in trouble for saying a lot of stuff, but that doesn't really matter. I'm actually I'm looking into buying a giant mill turn lathe to start doing them again at some point.
Yeah.
But it's like many years off. Yeah. But yeah, this is what I think of at night is like, how do you grind CNC grind a blade with no locating holes? Like, how do you hold it?
Right.
Those are the things that I sit and think about. But
guards, put it on, like actually have something that the hollow handle slides down on and clamp it on the guard.
And that's kind of what I was thinking. You have that flat behind the choil, behind all that. You'd have to locate kind of off of that. And then I was thinking about like some sort of C-shaped clamp that would just clamp on the whole handle with, two. I
mean, you could kind of make like soft jaws on your CNC, so you had like a fixture plate almost that just comes down and grabs it.
Yeah. We've also thought about, could you thread them onto something, like screw them onto something and then grind them like that? We've spent way too many hours. We shouldn't be spending like live shop hours talking about this stuff.
Right.
So no, but there's ways to do it. I
think you'd have a hard time indexing if you screw it on something. I don't know.
You got to have a really accurate thread.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But it could be really cool. And look, Tony Marfione's done an absolute incredible job doing his take at those one piece knives. And so I see what he does. Oh man, I get so jealous. And so we'd like to do that. I've actually, my engineer right now, I've been bringing him, he's really good on SolidWorks and very good at like organizing our catalog and SolidWorks catalog, because there's obviously our internet catalog of what we sell, and then there's this whole catalog behind the scenes of what we have modeled up and all that. And so I've taken him to task of modeling every one of the one-piece knives just so we could have them.
Yeah.
So it'd be a lot of fun. I don't know any sort of timeline on that. I mean, it's quite a ways out, but I would love to do it.
It'd be a pretty cool thing to like tie to an anniversary of the company, or, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There are a lot of ways you could do that. That'd be really, really nice. Or even hook it, do some kind of collab where you pair it up with some piece of gear that somebody else is doing. Tons of ways. That'd be really fun.
Yeah, we're really good at missing anniversaries, like blowing right past them. Like we just brought out the Cbn 31 on like the 32nd year of the Cbn being out, and, stuff like that.
Yeah, knife maker time. It's a whole different timeline.
It is, yeah. It is, yeah. So, no, I'd love to do those. They're just such cool knives.
Very cool. So there was a Chris Reeve Knives shop in South Africa. Did anybody else come with them, or they just came?
Just two of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the shop was the garage, right? It was the house.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
My mom said her breaking point of working out of the house was she was running around trying to complete some birth cards, some guarantee cards, and write, the model and all that, the birth date and stuff. And when the only countertop type place, like flat surface she could write these on, was her bedroom dresser. She's like, look, we need to get somewhere. Like the kitchen was just full. There's motorcycle parts in the living room. And at that time, my dad's dad, Stan, my grandfather, he was making wood boxes, like wood cases for a lot of the special edition knives.
Oh yeah.
So I guess the dining room table's covered in that. The whole garage is full of lathes and grinders. It was really, I guess, a little lathe and a couple grinders and just knife making stuff, right? So
yeah,
that was it.
Wow.
But yeah, nobody else came over from South Africa.
Okay. So they had to establish the entire thing from scratch once they got here.
Yep.
Yeah. So was there a path that went, or did they kind of pick a spot and then grow that spot? How did the business progress from there?
Yeah. So I guess now we're in our third location, but we have another building across the street. So in that very first location, there's pretty little. But I guess Chris just had the vision of like, look, I got to grow this thing. He had the basic view of custom knives are just not going to pay the bills like production knives will.
Right.
It's a steady income when you have a backlog. It's just an amazing thing. And you can you can dial in your quality, your consistency, what your product is if you make them the same all the time. Right. So that was just the view, and they just stuck their heads down and tried to choose good business practices. Really, I think they just made a lot of good choices and just worked their asses off.
Yeah,
I mean, I go back to hear some of the stories from my folks, and like, my God, like you worked hard.
Yeah,
So yeah, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in it.
It's no joke, man. And I've heard your dad talk about that before, or maybe, like on an interview stuff or whatever,
right?
About dialing everything in. And, like I work in the auto industry, right? And every time we change something, there's a bunch of, kind of starting over, not really, right? Because we know how to do stuff, but to get the quality where it's like no kidding dialed, you need to do it exactly the same way. So we have like time periods where, you know, you can't change anything. It's like, well, we're going to save money. Don't care. We can't change anything. We just have to make these for a while.
It will fall off the rails if we change a thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's something definitely to be said for it, especially when you're doing any kind of significant numbers, right? And at the quality that he demanded, right? It was super high. And I think that's part of the well-earned reputation of Chris Reeve knives, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think, what a lot of fans and folks, like customers, don't quite understand when they say, you know, why haven't you brought anything new out, or those kind of things. Hey, what about all these different blade steels, or this material or that material? It's like, I'm pretty abreast on a lot of the new fancy stuff, but there's a lot that goes into a change. And to make sure that we can hit that quality marker each time, it's tough to jump into a bunch of different things. We managed to do it, and I would love to do a lot of stuff. I have 4 fixed blade designs in my back pocket I've been trying to bring out for 5 years, you know, and there's just not really a good, appropriate, responsible time to do it.
Right.
And so, yeah, it has its challenges, and it's consistency that brings quality. So we kind of get caught in the middle, but it's good. Sometimes you have to take a push step forward, and you have to bring out something new because it's that forced step forward. But it's tough. I mean, we've brought out, like when we brought out the Impinda, which is our little slip joint, it was probably one of the worst ideas that we ever made. Not the design, it was like the timing and to bring out another knife.
Yeah.
Like it frankly, it hurt us to bring that knife out.
Okay.
And it's an amazing knife. It goes together great. There's a lot of, like, the production side of it's pretty good. They sell like you can't believe. I mean, people like slip joints. It was the only trend that we say we hit on time. It's outside of the frame lock. So yeah, I don't know. It's just funny, but yeah, I think there's a sliding scale between kind of like jumping around and doing a lot of different things and consistency and quality.
So why did you make the comment that it's like it somehow went backwards or wasn't a great thing? What about it didn't work or wasn't right for the time?
We weren't like set up in the shop to do it, frankly.
Okay.
Yeah, we bought a wire EDM, didn't ever have one before, and kind of learned that on the fly. So the entire back spring and blade profile is finished. It's a finished profile right off the EDM. Oh, okay. To make the whole mechanism kind of work. Because Harsey came up with a brilliant little idea, like an actual little innovation on a slip joint. Because look, slip joints have been done in every single fashion under the sun, right? There's not many corners to actually kind of innovate in.
Yeah.
And he just did a great little feature in the forward head of the Impinda in the spring, in the lock spring, that gave it a tension differential. So it was easier to open and harder to close.
Okay.
And that kind of came off of a joke because we were already planning on doing a slip joint. We're going to do like a 45 lock or like a French lock, French fit, or there's many names for it. You know, it's just like a big lug that drops into a notch in the back.
Yeah.
I said some sort of flippant comment to Harsey. I said, look, if you make that spring so strong that it rips my thumbnail off every time, I'm going to tank the fucking project. You know, I said something like, so I don't know if that stuck in his head or if it went in one ear and out the other. It easily could have, but he came at SHOT Show one of the years back. I can't, 18 or something, with a working concept with a blade in Lexan handles. And was like, hey, check this out with the spring, and it had this kind of feature. I was like, God, Bill, that's it. Like, that's clever. Let's do it, you know? And so, yeah, it was learning the wire EDM. We were at a funny spot in the machine shop too. A little bit after that, myself and my lead machinist, currently my lead machinist, Sharad, he's my age. Like, we're 6 months apart. Like, he just turned 30 today. And which scares me because, like, a bunch of us are 30 years old running around the shop trying to make good decisions. But anyway, so we kind of ran out a guy that was running the shop. Or I hate to say ran out. We found our differences with a guy that had been running the shop for the last 5 years or so. And we basically had to refixture the entire shop over the last 2 years of just getting out bad fixturing that had been made since Chris had left. And kind of in the last couple of years that Chris had left. He retired in 2014, 15.
Okay.
Anyway, so a lot of like aluminum fixtures. Like we don't cut any aluminum. We only cut titanium and steel. So you build aluminum fixtures with a steel pin in there, and it doesn't take long before that pin's wobbling all over the place. There's no repeatability. Like it's like building a house on butter. And we told this guy this. And so anyway, long story short, we basically had to refixture the entire shop and kind of doing it back how in a fashion that Chris used to do it. Cold rolled mild steel pins, nice big heavy duty shock absorbing, vibration absorbing fixtures. And so, that Impinda project came in right before all that, and it just kind of fell apart. And then we crashed our horizontal, probably $1.5 million impact to the company.
Ouch.
That was just, my mom and I got back from a 2-week vacation in South Africa. And like the morning we stepped on the floor, they're like, hey, guess what just happened? And we toasted a horizontal basically.
Ouch.
So those are the risks of running a machine shop. So we just weren't set up for it. But we finally pulled our act together and really got the knife going. We do a lot of things where or this is quite typical, where we announce something, debut it, maybe have the first 50 and then take a year to deliver them. It's like, golly, I hate doing that,? And so I really learned my lesson on that one. Was like, we're not going to be doing that again as much as we can.
Okay. So it's an interesting thing. One of the tagline things for the show for us is everybody has a story. And part of that comes from the idea that, sometimes people on the outside looking in look at knife makers and say, okay, knife maker, right? They must be a machinist or they must be a blacksmith or whatever, right? They have this idea of what a knife maker is. And one thing that we've demonstrated loud and clear over a whole bunch of interviews is, no, there are those guys, there are machinists and there are blacksmiths, but there are also, artists and people that didn't know anything about knives, or like Michael, right? He had a writing background and he wasn't a machinist. He didn't know how to run the equipment, right? So people from all different walks of life become knife makers, and that ends up sometimes being apparent in their work, right? Mm-hmm. Some people have an artistic background and you can see that in their designs. And other people have a machining background and you can see that sometimes in their designs because they tend to be a little more mechanically shaped.
You can tell when like a machinist is a knife designer.
Yeah.
I love it. I just grew up around a lot of machinists, so it's like, you're a machinist, right? Yeah.
Right. Okay. Exactly. Yeah. So it's pretty interesting to see that stuff. And so in Chris's case, he was a machinist. That's his background. Is that right?
He was a tool and die maker.
Tool and die maker. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So obviously that comes with a deep understanding of machines. So he'd been turning on a lathe since he was about 10, 11 years old or so. And the same thing with my grandfather, Stan. He'd been turning on since he was about 10 or 11. Naturally, I started turning about 8 years old. So I got 2 years on him. They're both, Stan passed away a handful of years ago, but they're both just phenomenal, machinists, I guess. Yeah. Woodworkers, guys that can turn. But Chris knew how to run a mill and everything. And he journeyed as a tool and die maker. He spent 13 years, in his apprenticeship and journeyed as a tool and die maker. So he used to make a lot of big injection molding dies for, various companies, but he worked in a lot of, actual tool shops where they made tools like screwdrivers and hammers and things like that.
Yeah. And
so he'd make a lot of the injection molding dies for that world. And it basically just, I sum it up, as he learned the right way to do things, right? He always used to say that, well, there's a right way and there's a wrong way. And it's like, sure. But it gave him the foundation of how to make a fixture properly, what the machines are doing. He loosely dabbles in programming a CNC machine. Like we have a little Bridgeport at home in the home shop, a little 3-axis knee mill with a little tiny, controller stuck on it. And so he's a little bit of that, but in the shop, it's funny because the guys would always be like, well, Chris, you don't quite understand what's going on with the CNC machine. He goes, no, hold on. I know exactly what's going on. I don't know the computer with the buttons and things, but I can tell you what that machine's doing.
Right.
When I talked about like shock absorbent fixtures, when you're cutting materials like steel and titanium, you have to have something to dissipate the vibration. So you have to build your fixtures in a certain way, approach the cut in a certain way, use certain tools at certain times, you know. And so anyway, that kind of gave him that foundation.
Right. Yeah, I think, we had Jeremy Marsh on the show, and Jeremy worked in a die shop for a long, long time.
Okay.
And I think that stuff, same thing. It gave him a great basis for some of the finishing stuff that knife makers do, right? And maybe even a little bit, just because, die work requires it, a little bit of the, I'm going to call it artistic, but not necessarily in like a painterly or sculptor way, but a little bit, right?
Oh yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Having a feel for what's happening to make a die work properly. And
bingo.
Big piece of why he's able to do what he's able to do today. So.
And the tool and die maker ends up learning a lot of different things in the tool room or in the shop. You get versed on grinders, like surface grinders. You get versed in mills. You get versed in lathes. So there's like a nice pool of skill set and bigger extensions of your toolbox, I guess, to draw from. So yeah, you see somebody like Jeremy Marsh, and man, like I said, you nailed it with like the finishing. So it's not just making the dang thing to the right shape. Like you got to make it look good too.
Right.
You got to finish it and make it presentable so somebody will buy it.
Yep, exactly.
So no, that's yeah. So that's kind of where Chris came from.
Yeah. So they came and were making the hollow handled knives, the one-piece knives. And at some point, the whole folder thing started. How far back does that go, and what does that timeline look like?
Yeah, so let's see, the Sebenza, which was originally, Chris called it the titanium folder. Very flamboyant name, the titanium folder. He developed in 1987, and from my understanding, him and Michael Walker developed the same thing on two ends of the globe at the same time. I think that was kind of settled over a couple glasses of scotch.
All right.
This is well before my lifetime, but that's kind of how my mom explains the whole thing. Look, Michael is an amazing knife maker, and both him and my dad have I think great rapport, and we have loads of respect for Michael.
Yeah.
So everyone has to remember, this is pre-internet days, so you couldn't just kind of like hop on Instagram and see what like the latest thing was.
Exactly.
So I guess they've kind of settled to say that. I believe that's where we stand. Because it was a unique idea to Chris. Chris called it the integral lock, and Michael called it the frame lock. Anyway, that's just a little bit of context.
Yeah.
So he developed that in 1987, and so by the time when they came over to the States, it was kind of pieces and parts and a couple of working models that he brought over to the States, and then really immediately on the side was starting to try and say, okay, how do I repeat this and how do I make this a thing? Because he made all sorts of different folders. He'd made like the Helix Lock, which is a mechanism like the Open-L, just with a little ramp so it locks in a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
He'd done his Lock 45, which was very similar. I think he'd done the Lock 45 before then. I could be wrong on that. Anyway, so it's not like he hadn't made folding knives prior. But especially in the late 70s, fixed blades were a big thing. Replica daggers were things. Like I've got two gorgeous replica daggers that he made that are just phenomenal. So you look at it and be like, that's got a CR logo on it? Like, wow.
Yeah.
Anyway, so early 90s, that turn of the 80s into 90, 91 is when we started really starting to get Sebenzas out of the door. And I think they even came up with the name Sebenza. And we've got collectors that know the nuances of how it all went down, but there's they're handmade at first, and then they turned into like the P Sebenza, where we put a little P on it, which everyone thought was prototype, but we called it production. So like, there's a lot of things that we do ass backwards like, to spite ourselves. Oh, geez, talk about like answering emails on that one. So I got a prototype. Like, no, it's actually production, but it might as well be. And then there's PPs, which are pre-production. And anyway, but that was that early era. And then what's quite amazing is that knife essentially hasn't changed for 30 years. Small tweaks. And I guess that just speaks to when you land on something. And it's influenced a lot of knife makers and a lot of knife designers throughout the industry. So, and so it's funny because by the time 2009 comes around and we stopped taking orders on the one-piece knives, then the needle had flipped the other way to primarily folding knives coming out of the shop rather than fixed blades.
Yeah. So Sebenza went through, like you said, a bunch of knife nerd level revisions, right? Like where people are paying attention to crazy stuff, right? Like, oh, that's before the chatter marks appeared on some bevel somewhere, right? All that kind of stuff that we all like to freak out over.
Yeah.
So there's like kind of there's the original Sebenza, but then there's there's our string of changes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you get into, I hope I get all this right. This is why we have like a binder in the front office that we call the Bible. We try and get as much accurate history there as possible. My mom's a walking history book, which is amazing. But no, yeah. So it went from like the P Sebenza into the original, I believe, and then I think oh, geez, guys, this is where you might just have to look up on that line, because then we rolled into the regular, because the regular, and then it rolled into the classic, and then kind of into the 21 and 31.
Okay,
so I can't remember off the top of my head right now.
No, that's all good.
There's a great Blade Forums timeline. One of our customers, I think his name, he's a Chinese fellow. I think he goes by Zhu Pengfei. I hope I said that right.
Okay.
He's been a long-term collector, very, very nice guy. And I believe he has the most accurate to date, nuanced history of the Sebenza. Cause I found a PP, a pre-production somewhere in a box that I think was Chris's. And it was all dirty and like half the blades like been ground off and everything. And I was like, I said something about it, and he goes, no, actually it's do. I was like, wow, shoot, cool. And he sent me more than I wanted to read on the Sebenza. I was like, okay, cool.
Right.
I trust you, man. Like, you've got the data. So
that's very cool.
I think that's kind of how the iterations went, though.
Yeah. It's definitely a benchmark knife in the industry, right? Without question. Certainly my experience with the Sebenza was I owned a bunch of other knives. Somebody said, oh, no, you need to buy one of these. And I was like, no, that's too much money. No, that's ridiculous. Who would do that? Yeah. And eventually did, and it was like, yeah, you get it. Yeah. So I think lots and lots of people have that kind of moment, right? Where it's like, ooh, this is just really, really good. Super simple, like beautiful simplicity kind of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of the moment when you look into high-end binoculars for the first time and you go, oh, I get it. Now I can see stuff. Like, you have that coming moment. And a lot of people have that with different models or different knives out there that are not ours. But a lot of people have throughout the years with the Sebenza.
Yeah.
Which is, it's an honor to be a part of it. Holy cow. I mean, that's such a cool thing,
Well, yeah, like maybe we talked before the show, you make the same knife for a long time, and
right.
That doesn't come without burden, right? I think sometimes people look at that like, oh, of course it's easy. Of course they're doing a good job. They make the same damn knife for a whole bunch of years.
It's like, you better figure it out by now.
Yeah, right. But the reality, I think, is that, or I expect, is that it's not easy to make a really perfect knife every single time. Yeah. And people, I think, can look past that or underestimate what it takes to actually do.
Right. And you look over 30 years and how many different people were involved with that.
Right.
Right. A lot of people think, oh yeah, some people come and go. And we've got like Mike Bradshaw, who's in our hand grind room, where they do a handful of finishing touch features to the blades, and then they sharpen every knife. He's been with us for 16 years. He's still from the era of making one-piece knives and hand filing thumb serrations and stuff like that. Lisa has been with us this is her 21st year. She's been doing uniques, like the unique graphics that we do. They're kind of like one-off little graphics on the face with the milling machine and electroanodizing. And so there's a lot of people that have had their hands, for better and for worse, like in this lineage of the Sebenza and then the rest of our knives. So it takes a lot of different people, and it just takes people to do things. People in a good idea, I guess.
Right, exactly. Yeah, those uniques that Lisa does are really, really pretty. There's always something cool in there, right? Where it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
How the hell?
I mean, we're still stunned on a regular basis. Like, what? You came up with that? Like, Jesus. You know, it's like, and like, yeah, I don't know. So she's one of 3 people that have done it. So Chris did him originally. And that at the time kind of took his knives, he said, out of the standard. Back then it was just tactical. It's kind of like tactical category. And then there's like, I guess, traditional, or there's everything else. There wasn't like EDC, all the nuances that we have now, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm trying to get out there. But anyway, it took it out of that normal, plain, sandblasted titanium handle, kind of bland handle, and it moved him up into art knives, I guess. Not like what, say, like Bertie Rietfeld makes or whatever, who's a very good friend and one of the best knife makers on planet Earth. But anyway, it just kind of put him into this other category. And so he always liked a simple, effective approach. He was always fascinated by, say, like Japanese painting, where there's not a single thing on that page that doesn't need to be there. He was always enamored by that kind of approach. And so he's kind of got a simple take. And then there's a small period there for a while in the early 90s that Scott Cook took it over. He was our shop foreman for quite a while, and then went on to go make his own custom knives. And he makes a phenomenal knife. He's a great craftsman, great craftsman. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, Scott would spend most of the day in the hand grind room, elbow to elbow with Chris, grinding 1-piece knives, and then pop out and hop on the mill and try and make something artistic, and did a very good job with that. And then Lisa came along and she picked it up and just ran with it, and just does stuff that I just am blown away with.
Yeah, I think if you handle, I'm not sure everybody's had a chance to actually have a Loxa in hand, but I think if anybody who's handled a Sebenza and a Loxa next to each other, you know what I mean? The lineage is clear, right?
Right, yeah.
The feel of the knives is similar to me, right? It's part of that. What if we call it, guys, the knife maker family tree thing, where sometimes you can see people, you know, who've worked together or mentored under someone or whatever, and then they teach someone else down the road, and you know, it creates this family tree where you might look at a knife and say, oh, I can see some Sean Kendrick in that, right? And oh, that's because Sean taught this guy who taught this other guy who's now making this other knife. And it's kind of cool.
Yeah, Harsey and I talk about the tree branch of design quite often. And it's like, is this another limb of that tree branch of thought process? Yeah, there's a lot of similar lines there. And he does a great job. I mean, just awesome.
What were you going to say, Michael?
No, you can just, like you're saying, you can tell they're cousins, you know, that rode cool bicycles as kids together, and, you know.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then you have like Michael Raymond comes along. And just does, like, almost blows everyone else out of the water. Like, holy cow. And the first time I met Michael was at Blade East a handful of years ago. And he just told me so much about how much he just admired Chris, and how influential, like, his designs and thought process and drive for quality was. And so, you know, another person that took that tree branch of design and just blew it out of the water. I mean, one day I would love to have a Raymond. I've held them a handful of times. It's phenomenal knives.
Yeah. Yeah. They're really, really, really good.
Yeah.
So Tim, how do you get into the story here? Like, you kind of grew up around this stuff, obviously, right? This is the family business. And so, you know, it's funny, when we had Laren Thomas on, he said his dad would always tell the kids that, remind them that he was world famous knife maker.
I love that part, man.
Yeah. So
I love that part.
So like, were you into this stuff, or to working on machines or whatever, from the time you were really young, or was this something that kind of came along for you later in life? Or, because I know you have a bunch of other interests, so.
Yeah, kind of both. My standard joke is my mom filled out my W-2 when I was born. So I've been working with the company my whole life. I mean, I can't tell you how many times as a kid, it's inventory, you know, time, and come in and I'd sit and count tiny ceramic balls, like thousands of tiny ceramic balls or screws or lanyards or boxes or whatever. I used to fold boxes in my sleep. I'd tie lanyards for, you know, a couple pennies or something. So I've always just naturally got folded into the company. My folks coming from South Africa, they had year-round school, so the kids would only be home for a couple weeks at a time, any point throughout the year. So they show up here and they're like, "Wait, what do we do here for 3 months? You know, like, can't you go back to school?" And they didn't have a lot of money to put me into like various activities. So I did a handful over the years. Like did roller hockey once, and never doing that again. Stuff like that. But I spent a lot of time and a lot of my summers at the shop. There's classic stories of me taking, like the little tiny GI Joes where they had a parachute on top of them, and you could, so dropping those on employees because we had kind of like a little mezzanine. We had this weird old rifle, like antique rifle. That was like a drop block style that you could put in. You could put like an expo marker in it.
Oh, wow.
And then it would shoot from one office to the other. So like little antics like that. I'd be, Superman flying around the shop in an office chair, stuff like that. I think finally, it was about 8 years old, and my dad said, "All right, enough with this. Like, I'm going to show you a little bit of what we do."
Yeah.
And he put a classic Chris Reeve Knives shop coat on, which is just a navy blue shop coat that goes just past your knees, but this went to my toes. And I had to roll up the sleeves naturally and set me on a milk crate or some sort of box, and then put the whole kit and caboodle, the respirator and the goggles, and everything's kind of like hanging off my face. I can barely see. And he said, "Well, I'm going to show you how to grind blades and just show you what this looks like." And so he ground a couple, and I that's when I first started grinding, or you just using a grinder. And so around about then, and then he kind of showed me the basics of the thought process of starting to work out a knife design, right? Whether it's just scribing on the steel, drawing with a Sharpie and saying, "Okay, well, I've got this hunk and I want to take this away. I want to take this away. I want to drill a hole here," and just the basic thought process. And it was nothing like genius or rocket science. It's just, when you're 8 years old, you'd never done that before.
Right.
So that was kind of how I started making a handful of knives. And then over the years, I could get into my teenage years, and every dinner table conversation had stuff to do with the business, whether it was drama or good things. And, blade forms is a huge thing. And so I've got this deep seated hatred for blade forms because just hearing the word, because it just brought so much like controversy into the family and into the daily life, so much stress and drama, right? It's the same thing as Facebook groups these days, for better or for worse. Like they still, on this end, it brings a lot of stress and drama. So, I know there's great corners of blade forms. I'm not trying to knock all of it. We sold a lot of knives through blade forms, so I appreciate that. But then through the teenage years, I started moving more and more away from it, and kind of naturally. I spent a lot of time very close to it, and so then I would start spending more time with my friends. I got into playing music. I think it was about 14, and I just randomly, we were driving past Guitar Center one day. I said, "Mom, I got some money. Can I go buy a guitar?" And she looked at me so strange and was like, "Sure." It was like the 5th of July sale, right, at a Guitar Center. And I went and bought myself a little cherry red electric Stratocaster, a little Fender Stratocaster that I still have. It's still the only electric guitar that I have, even though I went back and worked for Guitar Center for a year and a half. I bought a bunch of studio gear instead of guitars, which I think was a better choice. And so that kind of opened the door of music and I guess that side. I'd always been put into art classes and not art schools, but like art classes. And I even did a couple of after school drawing classes. I'm just recalling this right now. I haven't thought about this in ages. So I've always had some sort of artistic streak. I can draw more than a stick figure. I can paint. I can do those kind of things. So art was kind of always something I was like, yeah, I can do art. That's cool. I'm useless at math. I can like do the basic 4 functions, and that's about it.
Yeah.
So I definitely lean one direction, or lean that way.
Do you think that artistic, the art thing, do you think that was something, parents do this thing, obviously, right? You have to recognize what your kids are good at, or what's a spark, or where they might have a talent. Do you think that part of that came from your mom and dad? Or do you think that was something that was a talent that you had that was kind of unique and different? Or, obviously your dad's got an eye for design, right? That's a thing. But lots of guys like Chris wouldn't remotely consider themselves an artist, right? That's like a recoil word, like, whoa.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. He has a lot of words similar to that produce the gag reflex. Artist actually might not be one of them though.
Okay.
Though he hates people's he hates the fanboy thing. Like people, like there's one time at Blade Show, a guy got on his knees and did the whole like bowing and he
oh geez,
he just about knocked the guy out. I mean, we're all sitting there like terrified. He's gonna fucking deck this guy.
Yeah.
He just got so cringy with that kind of stuff. But I mean,
That would
artists
have been awesome.
yeah, Chris Reeve knocks out diehard fan at Blade Show. Like, great. Yeah, headlines would go great. There's been some close calls at Blade Show.
We've heard a couple of stories over the years. I mean,
I may have had one of those fun talks with your dad.
We caught up a couple of years ago at USN, Tom, and it was fun hearing the story from your side. On the but,
there's always three sides to every story.
Yeah. Two and what actually happened.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, definitely the artistic side came from my dad. I would say, I think my mom even says that, though she is much more creative and artistic than she lets on. I always have to kind of poke her and remind her that. I think it's just, they saw I was into some of those things and just, I think lightly encouraged it. They never really forced me to, I can't say they didn't force me to do anything because I had great folks growing up and they taught me a lot and made me do the things that like build foundational building blocks to be a good person, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm not calling myself a good person. I'm just saying like they pointed me in the right direction.
Yeah. It matters.
It does. Yeah. They made me stick out school. I wanted to do football for a little bit. So they said, you're not going to quit in the middle of the season. This is not how this works. It's simple things like that.
Yeah.
So it just kind of fostered and from a very, very young age, my dad always put stuff in front of me like tools. Like my first toy was a 2x4 with a hole drilled on kind of on one side with a wood peg, like a little dowel peg. And he gave me a hammer to like knock it in and out. And then like a Phillips screw stuck in it and a flathead screw stuck in it and like a couple other little things. And it was like, that was kind of my first toy, at a probably way too young age these days to be given that to him. And so I learned the basics of a screwdriver and how tools worked. And they always pushed me or put things in front of me that taught me how things work. Like there's even a little CD-ROM that I could put in the computer. It was called How Things Work. And you clicked on different things and it showed mechanics and stuff. And I was just fascinated by that. So I've always been, as I grew up in the knife industry via osmosis, I also grew up around in the basics of engineering and physical sciences, I guess.
It's a great way to
by
say
osmosis. Yeah. Like I understand how a door works very well compared to like a lot of other things in say like math. I just do not understand.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Or like I know how a door works better than a lot of my friends, So, yeah.
I think some of that stuff is, the whole spatial relationship thing, right? And being able to understand and see when you see something move or something has a function or a tool, and being able to understand in your head, like what exactly is happening when this is turning or this arm is moving or whatever. And that only comes with that kind of exposure. And a lot of people don't get that. And as a result, they don't have the ability to visualize it or understand it.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest thing going for me in what I do on a daily basis these days is I've got a pretty good understanding of mechanics and I'm pretty mechanically inclined and I can visualize stuff in my head of how things work. It's not like I'm the only person on planet Earth that can do that. But like, for example, we just recently bought our first 5-axis milling machine, and myself, my lead machinist Sherrod, and our engineer Mitch, we sat for like 3 hours in our conference room. I kind of work off of the end of the conference room table, and we're sitting there like putting our brains in knots trying to figure out. So we're going to use it for hollow grinding, and we're taking this table and spinning it and moving it in 2 more axes, and like, okay, do this, and it's a 4-inch wheel, and we pitched it then, and could do that, and it like. Oh my gosh, there's 3 hours you could see steam coming out of our ears. And we're probably the 3 that are best at doing this in the shop. And it just shows you like the world of 5 axes gets out there. But I think it's just definitely helped me having that basic understanding of how things work. So I think going into the arts, actually, I don't know, this might be a broad sweeping statement, but I think if you're somebody that understands the basics of how things work, you either go kind of into the artistic world and run with it, or you get very, very linear.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I went left instead of right or something.
Yeah. No, I can certainly see that. I mean, I think there's plenty of people that have that artistic or musical skill or that combination of stuff, right? Those things to me go hand in hand. I tend to think of them kind of collectively. But there's people that have those kind of skills that don't have a physical understanding. But I think when that stuff comes together, that's when some really cool stuff starts to happen. I think
you get some traction. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, okay, I can use this for something. Right. And I think it's your description of going through teenage years, right? Who doesn't reject everything around them in their teenage years, right?
Last thing I wanted to hear was the word Sabenza. Right. I mean, still some days the last thing I want to hear is Sabenza.
Right.
Yeah. So I spent 8 years trying to stay as far away from the company as I possibly could.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm going, right? I think that's natural, especially with a family business, is not everybody gravitates to just, this is what we do. This is our family thing. I'm going to keep going with it. And I love it. No, I think a lot of people run from it for a while and many come back to it and some never do. Right.
Sure. Yeah. Look, humans always have to kind of check out the grass on the other side. Right. If all you know is one thing and there's other things out there, you got to at least go check them out. I think that's a healthy thing for most people to do. So I always said that I would end up doing my own thing. I was very inspired by my father on the entrepreneurial, self-made, run my own business thought process. So I always told myself and kind of told my folks, I will do something that I create myself. Or like in some fashion, I will create something of my own. Yeah. So then I spent a handful of years, I mean, in my late teens, early 20s, and like through the end of high school and stuff, I naturally ended up getting jobs in the mall, and I ended up being pretty damn good at sales. Like I'm naturally kind of personable. I can hang. I can talk gear, man. I can really talk gear, and so, yeah, I worked at like Zoomies in the mall, so selling skateboards and snowboards, man. That's cake.
There you go,
What was funny is I actually started in the women's department and used to sell bikinis. Which is just so funny to think of myself. And really, I think I was the only person that could untangle the damn things. Nice. What happens is you get all these like 400 bikinis hung up. And I don't know if you ever seen them, but they're on these like little tiny crazy hangers with clips and stuff. And there's all these strings everywhere. And you get them all set, about 400, 450 of these things. And then you turn around and you turn back around and they're all in one giant knot. and so anyway, I spent a good amount of time doing that. But yeah, so about 8 years through, like Zoomies and Journeys and, man, I used to know how to like rebuild the POS system, like like their point of sale system, for not only my shop, but then my current wife or my wife.
Oh boy.
Whoa, we'll edit that out.
Yeah, she can hang. Yeah. We've been dating for a long time. So she worked right next door at PacSun. I remember like helping rebuild their systems for that. It's just, I kind of did the mall rat thing for a while, worked for Vans, and then I had to get out of there. Ended up working at Guitar Center for about a year and a half. And that was really cool. I could start getting involved with things that were just, I was starting, like the music side was starting to bloom or really start to come back up. I ended up getting a lot of friends, or ended up naturally finding a lot of friends that were amazing musicians, and they just taught me so much. I mean, the basics of just a stomp and clap, like drum track. Like, if you take your Mac and you put it on a wood floor, and then you stomp and use GarageBand, that's a kick drum. And if you slap your leg, that's a snare drum, and you can write music off that. And it's like, oh my God, cool. Because before that, it was just like, learning like Led Zeppelin licks and stuff like that. Right. So anyway, that just kind of like opened up a whole new gateway. And one of those buddies was working at Guitar Center, got me the job, who's actually Marissa's cousin. Anyway, long story short. So I basically took a job at Guitar Center to build a studio, which I think a lot of people that get jobs at Guitar Center do that. Like there's a primary goal, and then the secondary goal is like making money.
Right. Exactly. You can tell that when you go to Guitar Center.
My gosh. It's, I hate to knock the place, but it's like, it is hard to get musicians to work.
Oh yeah.
Oh my golly. Yeah. So I did that for a while, and I have a nice little recording studio in my house right now, and I just moved it from a basement into a loft, and it's pretty dang cool. So, then so that kind of gets to the end of my time out of the company. I was working at Guitar Center, and I'd occasionally go to the shows. Like I'd always help out the shows, and I loved the shows. I've been going to Blade shows since I was a kid. I used to like lay underneath the back table and hang out, and Mom would say like, can you give me the paperwork on a small unique with a hematite inlay or something like that? And I'd like go digging through and grab all and build the box, and then this little arm would shoot out, with all the paperwork stuff. Okay, perfect. So that's kind of how I helped out. And I know that hotel, the Renaissance Waverly, better than most of the staff, I swear to God. We've just been going there for so long. And so I loved it. So we went out to Europe. We do the IWA show, the IWA show, which is like the SHOT Show of Europe. We've been doing that for many years. And so I did that. I can't remember if it was my first or second time doing that. And I got back and I was making my coffee, getting ready to go back into work at Guitar Center. I was like, this sucks. I don't want to do this anymore. I could work for Mom.
Right.
Right. Chris was retired, and I was like, Chris had actually just retired, which would have worked because we're kind of red rag to a bully with each other in a professional environment. Yeah. But we get along very well outside of that. And so I don't think there's room for both of us, or our personalities are too big or something. I don't know if you ever met my dad, but he takes up most of the personality in the room. I don't have that big of a personality. Anyway, so it just worked out. He kind of stepped out as I stepped in. My mom ended up buying the business from him. And he retired fat and happy, right? Happily ever after, basically.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I wrote on a piece of paper, like my ideal job description with I think it was some kind of piddly little like marketing, like I can redo the website and like make us a Facebook page and an Instagram or, something like that. And I took a picture of it and sent it to Mom. I was like, hey, would you hire me? And she goes, yeah, I'd like start in 2 weeks.
Nice.
Okay, cool. So that's how I kind of joined in. I thought this is too good. I just got all my expenses paid for by talking knives and drinking beer in Germany. This is cool.
Right. That does not suck.
I want more of that. Yeah. So that kind of kicked me into it. And I've been with the company now for, I think it's 6 years going on 7 or something along those lines.
Nice.
Or 15 to 6 years. Yeah.
All right. So is Chris involved at all? Is he doing design stuff or anything like that? Or is he off kind of doing cowboy things like you said he probably wanted to?
He's doing cowboy things.
Nice.
Yeah, he has very little interest in being involved with the company. He's kind of, it makes sense with his personality. You really get to know him. And it's like, he's an all in or nothing kind of guy.
There you go.
It took him a little while to kind of unplug. And so he was working on a design basis for a little while, those first couple of years, and helping out with some of the transition, just making sure it went smooth. But he very much is just, he says like, I put in my 30 some years. I'm just so tired of it. I want to go do other things.
Right.
And I cannot blame him. So, he ran into some health problems at the end of 2016. He's doing okay. And I won't go into those too much to just keep his privacy, but, he's doing fine.
Okay.
Keeps him from doing as many cowboy things as he, I think, would love to do, but, that comes with age. And he lives in Boise, just happy. And so I'll catch up with him every couple of weekends. And it's always funny because I get about 15 or 20 minutes into catching him up to speed on the shop and all these different things. And he's like, okay, cool. I don't care anymore. It's your problem. Like the conversation changes. I'm like, hey man, I don't blame you. It's the same shit, just a different day and I go to him with a lot of problems. Like, you dealt with this too? He goes, oh yeah. No.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So he helps me from like falling off of cliffs, and I'll go to him with an idea and he says, hey, that's a good idea. Or, hey, I've tried that a couple times. Don't do that. I will save you a lot of money from doing that. It's like, okay, cool. So, all the new designs get, I guess, not really approved. To me, it's an approval. And a lot of the guys in the shop, I guess it's kind of a sense of approval because it's dad saying like, hey, you've done a good job. But I run stuff past him, and I don't want to sound cocky or anything, but I know what I'm doing, and I know where I'm taking the company, and I know what makes a good knife in Chris Reeve knives.
Yeah.
And so I don't necessarily need his approval in some, like we like pull all this stuff together and like, oh, I hope Chris likes it and he's going to strike it down. It's like very not like that, I guess.
I get what you're saying. It doesn't matter if it's knives or we just hung a new garage door at my house, right? My dad came to visit and he's like, "Hey, I saw your garage door." I'm like, "Yeah. What do you think?" He's like, "Oh yeah, that's really nice. It's really quiet. It's an insulated door." Yeah. Like, yeah, I like that. Yeah, nice. It's like, all right, cool, right? I mean, that's a parent-child thing, right? It doesn't matter what the situation is or whatever. There's something that feels good about having that ability. And not everybody does, right? And that's unfortunate. But having that ability to talk about stuff and get a little feedback, I think it's healthy, right? It can be healthy.
Oh yeah. I mean, it definitely checks a box for you. Okay, cool. I passed the dad test. And he'll give us good feedback. Hey, you need to make that little distance from the handle to the choil a little bit shorter, a little bit longer, or add a little bit to the back end here. The last couple of designs that we put in front of the old man, he said, these are great and minimal feedback. So it's like a guiding light. It's a touchstone, but I think at the shop, we know what we're doing for the most part and we know the direction that we want to go.
Yeah.
So
it's all part of that transition thing. And, I think as long as he was doing it and as much as for as many years as he was at the core of the tech piece of it, that has to take a little while, right? I mean, I can't turn stuff off. I tend to be the same way with stuff where I'm like either way into it or I'm not into it anymore. And that's hobbies or work or whatever. But it's hard to just kind of not be part of something.
Yeah.
That happens for a lot of guys that retire, right? It's like, well, what the hell do I do now? I don't know what to do now.
Luckily, he didn't have any projects in front of him to do,
Yeah.
So here's how my dad kind of defined this hilarious journey through his life into retirement. He goes, so I worked in the tool room and I worked on big injection molding dies that I couldn't move myself from station to station. I had to get other people. Hey, I wanted to move it from station 1 to station 2. You get a couple of guys and there's a forklift or a crane or whatever. You have to move it to the next space. Then he spent the next 30, 35 years working on tiny little things to tenths of a thousandth of an inch where you could put a couple hundred parts into like one tray, right? Then he goes, now I'm retired and I'm cutting. He's been making all this like big pine wood furniture where he takes a chainsaw and cuts certain pieces and so he's loving doing that. And it's amazing though, because he does not look like your classic pine woodworker. Like things are just so tight and crisp and everything's got a goddamn chamfer on it. Like he used to drive me crazy. Where are your chamfers? Like, I don't know. I didn't even think about that. It's like, well, every finished thing needs to have a chamfer on it. Okay. But he's right. Like you get into it nowadays, looking back, I'm like, if it doesn't have a round over, it better have a chamfer.
Right.
So.
Yep. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, he's a character.
So what's the arrangement? Like you're like an operations guy at Chris Reeve Knives at this point or something. Is that a way to describe it? Or what job title would you describe you have at the moment?
Yeah. We've battled to figure this one out for quite a while. But my mom gave me the title of like what is it? It's
little shit. No, sorry, I'm kidding. I'm completely kidding.
No, I usually call myself the resident shithead of Chris Reeve Knives. That's my self-made title. Somebody's got to drink the most beer and say the most swear words.
Yes.
But no, it's something like a product development manager or something vague enough, to fill that spot.
Okay.
How I define it is, so my mom runs the company. She's the head of everything. She owns and runs the company. She signs my paycheck.
Nice.
I do remember that. Then I have a production manager he's focused on numbers, getting things through the shop, making sure primarily the finished knife, what was I trying to say, like production line, because you have all these parts getting made around the shop and then they end up coming to a room, and then there's a small chain of people that do the finished knife stuff. So it's assembling it, sharpening it, putting the thumb lugs in, cleaning, boxing it, inspections, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So Ben, our production manager, he's very much involved and focused on making sure that works, and then ties into the various corners of the shop to make sure that the right stuff is in flow, the right parts are being made at the right time, and forecasting farther out. He's involved. So again, he's numbers based and pushing numbers through the shop. I am product based. I know I'm involved with every design change and approve every design change and come up with anything that is a new design. I figure out how we're going to make it, what machines we're going to make it on, who we're going to use to make it, what tools, future machine purchases, how we lay the shop out. I do all that. So that's kind of my corner, but then I end up wearing a lot of different hats. I'm kind of a business owner in training in many ways. So all the time I'm learning stuff. I'm involved with my mom in financial meetings and all the big picture stuff in the shop I'm readily involved with. But yeah, I'm product central. That's kind of my corner that I come from.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense. So what's the current landscape of Chris Reeve knives as far as equipment and like you guys, I assume on Sebenzas and stuff, you're doing some kind of CNC grinding or machining process on bevels and stuff like that. Do you do all that stuff in-house?
Yeah. We make everything in-house outside of the standard body screws and pins, the 303 stainless body screws and pins, which we'll start making in-house here at the end of the year. We'll be buying a couple screw machines and finally doing that ourselves. It's been a dream of Chris's for the longest time and just haven't gotten there. And then the pocket clip, Piranha makes our pocket clip. They've made it since day one, and I've got no major reason to change it, though I would love to just have it in-house because I like being vertically integrated. I always wonder what happens if Piranha can't make them, then I'm not shipping knives, but so everything else is made in-house. So we have a mill department, we have a turning department, we have a grinding department, and that kind of makes up the machine shop. And then you start getting into tumbling and finishing, hand grind, fit bench, inlays where they process the inlays and polish them and sand them and make sure they're good before they get put into the knife. They hand polish the handles. That's all rubbed out on a flat plate. But yeah, so the machine shop, I think right now we're sitting with 12 spindles, 12 vertical, 12 milling machines. Those are a handful of 3-axis mills. Vertical mills, and then 2 horizontals that are 4th-axis mills. Those 2 horizontals make all of the titanium folding knife handles in the shop. They're basically the 2 giant hearts of the company, and they just work day in and day out. And so if those go down, that's like major pucker factor from my angle.
Yeah, right.
Right. And then we just got a 5th-axis machine, which is really cool, 5th-axis milling machine, but we're going to be using it for Cbn Cup Grinding, which basically translates into putting hollow grinds on stuff.
Nice.
And then a whole bunch of grinders. Like we have 6 plus 3 gets you to 9. So 9 surface grinders in the shop doing different stuff. 2 of which are smart grinders. They're basically CNC 3-axis CNC controlled surface grinders that we use for the main hollow grinding right now. So all the Sebenzas get hollow ground off of those machines. It's called a Chevalier Smart Grinder. They're basically fancy makeshift flat machines. And Chris back in 2001, 2, it was like, hey, let's 3D contour grind with this. So we do what they're not like built to do, but it works pretty dang well.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get my head around this grinder that you converted to do hollow. Is this like a special tooling thing? Or using a round stone or something? Or how do you even doing that? Or is this proprietary? Am I prying?
No. This would be the closest thing to proprietary information that we have. But we don't hold anything. It's not Formula One racing here. There's been times where we've tried to be guarded about it. I'm like, what are we doing here? If you're stupid enough to try and do this, like, good luck. So if you know what a surface grinder looks like, it's kind of a big version of it. I can't remember exactly what size the table is, but at least 24 inches wide or long, I guess, and probably 18 inches deep. we have wheels made by Radiac and ASI that are an aluminum hub, and they're Cbn wheels. So it's a Cbn is carbon boron nitrate. It's very similar to, for the simple way to explain it is it's almost like having a diamond grid in there. Like think of it like that.
Yeah. Okay.
So you have your resin around the outside. So this is the cutting surface around the very outside of the wheel. As there's a resin and then these Cbn grits stuck in there, and it's better than aluminum oxide for what we're doing. You can cut hard steels nicer, you can get better finishes, you can cut faster, some of those kind of things. And the wheel doesn't change shape nearly like aluminum oxide does. We use aluminum oxide wheels elsewhere in the shop, so like cutting thumb serrations. We dress the wheel to have those grooves in it, and then we come in and grind those in the hard state, so it's a nice shiny finish.
Yep.
We use aluminum oxide for rough surface grinding, things like that. But these smart grinders are pretty cool. So anyway, so if you're standing at the grinder, and if somebody Googles surface grinder, you're going to see what I'm saying. So the spindle's looking straight at you, and the wheel's rotating, kind of like a clock right in front of you. And so we have the wheel's kind of shaped like a D shape, like cupped away from us, like a saucer that you're looking at the bottom side of the saucer.
Yeah.
And then we take the blades and we put them on a sine plate with the tips pointing towards the spindle, so away from you, and we kind of pitch them at different angles, and that gets you your different radius, or your different, radius of your hollow grind. So the more you pitch it, the bigger your hollow gets, and the more flat, the more to perpendicular, the smaller it gets. And it can only get as small as the diameter of the actual wheel. So we take that, and then we work in, we used to use Mastercam, and now we've moved into Esprit. And we go through a CAM program, and we program this wheel to move in 3 axes simultaneously. And we go through, I believe a Sebenza, it's 4 passes per side at about 5 minutes a side. We can grind a blade.
Wow.
Which is pretty good. But let me tell you about this 5-axis machine. So this is where, right? So this is where we're getting into like the newest tweak of this. As machine tools have gotten a little bit better over the years, and this is stuff that Chris has tried in the past with various successes and failures. I think a lot of it was some limits of technology and a lot more limits of crew, not quantity of crew, but quality of crew at that time. Cbn Cup Grinding, because this is kind of a common thing on mills, just standard milling machines, is to put like a Cbn 6-inch or 4-inch or 3-inch Cbn cup wheel in the spindle and do various grinding stuff. It's becoming more and more popular in the knife making world, production knife making world. So this whole surface grinder thing is like way out there. So we've been trying it again with getting back on the mills. So like recently we've moved all of our fixed blades onto an old 1997 Matsura, 2-pallet Matsura with a 6-inch cup wheel, and it's working great. So it's just 3 axes, and then we machine a little wedge fixture, so it pitches it up at a certain angle, and then we go from there.
Okay.
This 5-axis machine is really cool because we can just pick the angle and move it all over the place a lot faster. You're not trying to like set a sine plate or machine a wedge to a certain angle. You can also do simultaneous movements, but we've been working with 3M. They make a really killer grinding compound in the Cbn wheel. We're using a 4-inch wheel, and we come in and do this kind of simultaneous movement on the hollow grinding. So essentially what we've been looking at is rather than 5 minutes a side with 4 passes, we can do it in 1 pass with a spark out, which is basically just repeating your same pass in about it's like a minute 15 per side, which damn. Like that's smoking, man. That's fucking cool.
Just a major increase in performance.
Yeah, it's like 5 times, right? Like I can do the simple math. Yeah. The goal though, so it's funny because we don't have as much of a hard time hogging out all the material, right? So the when they go to put a bevel on, or the main hollow grind, the plunge location is plus or minus 1 to each other and to its location. The grind top of the grind line heights are plus or minus 1 thou. Sorry, when I say plus or minus 1, it's 1 thou. Edge thickness is plus or minus 1 thou, heel, belly, and tip. We remind the guys it's plus or minus, not plus and minus, because that makes a pretty wandering edge. And then the same thing with the exits, right? So they need to match up.
Yeah.
And so it's like that, hogging all that out is relatively easy, though that is quite a feat to hold that kind of tolerance and all those little features. It's the finishing right afterwards. So 90% of what we make are tumbled blades, and we go through our kind of classic stone wash finish that I guess we're kind of known for.
Yeah.
There's a lot of elbow grease that goes into those blades before they go in the tumbler. So it's stoning out the plunge. It's stoning out around in the belly where it starts to move into from the 2-axis movement to a 3-axis movement. You start getting chatter from the servo motors in the machines. It's like there's always this pursuit of trying to get a little bit better and a little bit better, and a little bit better. So the goal is like I could grind something. And I always joke, I'm like, if we get this down, I'm just parking that tumbler right next to the grinder. And so you just pull out the blade, toss it in the tumbler, and you'd be done with it.
Yeah.
So
you guys are actually stoning every Sebenza blade.
Yeah.
Wow.
And every blade that gets a tumbled tumbled finish. So if it gets coated, it's sandblasted and coated, but we do spend a lot of time looking at it post coating to make sure that there's no or a reasonable chatter grinding marks, right? Really no is what we're looking for, is no grinding marks.
Right.
Because you go into that plunge area and there's certain, you get like little steps, I guess. It's just the servo motors trying to sync together it's 3 motors in a 3-axis machine that's pulling in couple different directions, and they have to sync together. And the downside of these Chevalier surface grinders is they're I guess the best way to describe it is like the resolution of that movement is like not very refined.
Yeah.
But then you get into like a DMG Mori 5-axis milling machine, and holy cow, man, they sync up so well. Like we're just seeing a lot of better improvement there.
Yeah.
It's not quite the ticket, but we still have a lot to learn with that machine. So yeah, we're stoning them all out. We use like a pneumatic die finishing tool. We put like a little 600 or 800 grit abrasive insert in there, and it just vibrates, and they'll work out the plunge, and then they use a little tiny block that they'll custom make to the. Each guy kind of makes their own little block that fits to the particular hollow of each model, and they'll hand rub out with sandpaper that through the belly, and get it to a place where it looks good, and they know that it'll tumble out. And then we have 2 rotary tumbler what do they call them? Centrifugal barrel finishing systems is what they are. So it's big buckets that work like a chicken rotisserie.
Yeah.
Basically. So. They can tumble. What's crazy about those things is they'll do what our old vibratory tumblers would do in 36 to 48 hours. It does in like 20 minutes. It's like, holy cow. Like they spin it like half to 1 G-force in rotation. Like you can shoot a bucket across the shop in a hurry.
Yeah.
So
that's wild.
Yeah. Lots of handwork. Lots of handwork goes into these things.
I think that's a very interesting thing for people to understand, because I think folks think of them as a production knife, and that, you know what I mean? This is all somehow happening automagically. And the fact that it's not is an interesting thing. So that's where the 5-axis sounds like has potential to be money in the future. Is 1, the process time's way faster, and 2, ideally you'd eliminate a whole bunch of that hand step in the middle, or get rid of it at all of it if you could.
Hopefully. I mean, that's the goal. I just don't know. It still seems so far off. I mean, even if we just get the time down, we can work with that,
Right.
So we'll see where it can go. I mean, we've got a bunch of good brains involved with this. Like I am very fortunate to be working with a crew, or at least more of an immediate crew around me, that I think is many calibers above a lot of the crew that Chris had to work with. So there are many guys that worked really hard and were awesome at what they did and helped build the company. But I look back at a lot of those guys, and now that I'm in kind of this driver's seat, if you will, and I look back like, man, I don't think they were kind of cutting it as well. Yeah. So I'm just very fortunate.
Michael or Tom or Sean, you guys got questions about what's going on in the shop or any of this stuff that we're talking about?
No, it's kind of amazing to hear some of the processes that goes behind it. As a big, to me, manufacturer, I've got one very cheap CNC compared to what you guys have. It's kind of interesting to hear what you guys have going on over there.
Right. It's cool because they all do the same thing, right?
Yeah. You know, I'm looking at like your big tombstone type setups and stuff. Mm-hmm. And that the efficiency and stuff has got to be kind of fantastic. You know, you've got it down pat, I think. And that stuff, I strive for, even though that's not what I make or how I do stuff, I do greatly enjoy seeing something done so efficiently, so well. I mean, you guys are the gold standard for, manufacturing,
Sure.
It's cool to see, man. I dig it.
Yeah. I was 16 years old. My folks took me out to Leatherman. We went to Portland and I got to see like a factory tour of Leatherman. And it was a similar kind of thing where it was like Chris and I and Ann as well, looking around like, this is not what we do, but this is really cool. like they know how to put a lot of parts through that shop in a hurry. I mean, holy cow. So I get that understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I don't know. I mean, we've talked before about, cause we talked to lots of custom knife makers, and it's a very common theme where the guys will talk about, oh, well, I went to so-and-so shop and spent a few days or whatever. And it's not like, okay, I'm going to, steal a bunch of ideas or whatever, but right. Man, I get some stuff in my head after some of those experiences where I'm going to do things different than I was. And that's where it seems to me like, looking at some of the stuff you guys are doing with having kind of, worked that thing we talked about early on in the conversation of, man, we're going to really, really, really spend a huge amount of time focused on doing this, one, right, and two, faster and right.
Right.
That's something that, a lot of custom guys don't, one, have the ability to do because they're doing something different all the time. And two, they just might not have the exposure to it. Right. And there's probably some really interesting things to see in that whole pipeline that probably would be helpful and valuable.
Yeah. And like, I still really enjoy going to various custom guys shops. I love going and visiting Bill Harsey out in Creswell, and he's got his little shop, and like, oh crap, Bill, I never thought about kind of looking at doing it that way, or whatever. And you can always learn stuff from different people. I mean, shoot, this whole 5-axis grinding thing we got from a guy in a neighboring town who makes custom carbide tools for us. It was like, oh man, that's cool. Like, that's a good idea. And then it was like, because I, for the longest time, would tell the guys, like, we don't need a 5-axis machine. Are you kidding me? Like, the only reason that we call our parts 3D is we put a chamfer on them. I always joke. We make a pretty simple knife, and so I said, we don't need a 5-axis machine, but I wasn't looking at it this way. And part of the reason too is like, you can immediately pitch it different ways. And so you could rather, what would maybe take you 2 different operations and 2 separate fixtures, in a 3-axis mill, you just move it there. Like on 5-axis, you just move it to that angle. Like, oh, that was fast. So it's efficiency on that. It's just fun to play with new technology and stuff too.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I love learning new ideas. It's cool when you get an idea that you didn't like directly steal, but it really influences you, and you know where it came from, but it influences you and you can run with it, and it makes a big improvement to your life. That's why you have to talk to people all the time and go step out of your bubble a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I was just going to mention, I don't know if you remember, but like, I don't know, it was like 10 to 15 years ago. There were some DVDs on the Chris Reeves like method or whatever. And I remember getting those Blade show, and that blew my mind at the time. Literally, like, I think it popped.
Yeah.
It was awesome. I can remember calling up Luke and being like, dude, you gotta see this.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember those DVDs.
They're great.
Man, I would love to bring you through the shop now. Not that it's like it's changed and it hasn't.
Oh, I'd love to come up.
It's like the machine's turned white instead of a bunch of different colors.
So Tom, for people who haven't seen the DVD that you're referring to, what about it got your attention or blew your mind or whatever?
It was just like an inside look at Chris Reeves knives. It was like how they produce them, and it was rather long. It was 2 DVDs.
Oh wow!
And I mean, it just walked through it from the grinding room to the lady that customizes the Sabenzas and does the artwork on them and all that kind of stuff. It was just really good.
He
It was
goes
a
into
great promotional video that really put a lot of confidence in what they were doing just because of the way they're doing it. But it was a great inside look for a maker.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting perspective I've never thought about. Sorry, it just being another guy in the industry looking at that. I just saw it from I remember the film crew at my house, right?
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah.
I don't want to like blow smoke or anything, but you have to understand how much of an impact that company's had on a lot of us custom makers.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like I've owned some of the one-piece stuff, and I know seeing those and holding those at a very early age, I didn't realize it then, and I realized it later in life that it clicked something. A gear moved when I saw that, and you realized, okay, that's possible now. What else is possible? And it really, every time you see something like that, or see how tight tolerances can actually be and how well something can be made, it changes your view of what custom knives are and what's possible.
Sure.
And it changes us as makers as a whole. It really does. And I think your company's not just been important for the customers and stuff, it's important to us makers too. It really is.
Yeah. I love hearing that. That's why. Because look, I mean, the old man was he's my biggest inspiration. Are you kidding me? Like, I don't know how to design knives outside of a Chris Reeve knives style.
Right.
To me, that's what a knife looks like. Like, that's how you go about it. So, yeah, I get it. I get it in some fashion, but I love hearing that because I guess something I don't think about that much is just kind of the point of view of seeing
you see so much
Chris.
like over designing nowadays, and and I get in my own head sometimes about that of I need to add more and more and more. And I'm not talking about just materials. I'm talking about more elements to a knife, which doesn't.
How many bevels can you put on the blade?
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily make it a better looking knife. I mean, you guys have sold probably more than who knows how many you guys have sold, but it's a shitload of knives.
Yeah,
you know, and it's a very clean, classic look. And we have to remember that sometimes when we're designing, that it's not always about, I'm going to shove as much design in this son-of-a-bitch as I can, and it's going to be the best thing ever. It doesn't work that way.
Pump it full of design.
Yeah. 100% design.
Yeah, Chris is really good at like taking things out that didn't need to be there.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to do.
Yeah,
to yourself.
and make it work well and look well. And it's obviously, worked really well.
Yeah. Here's a music nerd thing. Are you guys familiar with the Brian Eno?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like ambient music, all that, a huge influence to me. I love that guy. Produced some of the biggest, coolest records. He used to work with a lot of bands and help produce their records, right? And so he'd have a band come in the studio, and he would say he would use limiting factors. So he would go, okay, today we're going to cut the studio in half lengthwise, and we're not going to use anything on the right side of the studio. Or he would say, we're going to work with no doubling technology. So no delays, no reverb, and you can take it as far as you want, right? But it's these places to jump off. Like, is that no multi-tracking? Is that no, right? Like, how far do you want to take that? But there's these limiting factors. And he was very much known for taking a song or full album or whatever, and then just going through it with not a cleaver, but like maybe a scalpel, just taking stuff out.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you come up with I think a lot of greatness. Chris is pretty damn good at that.
Yeah. I mean, somewhere in there's, I don't even know probably really the right words to use for it, but it's almost like, artistic and creative restraint, right? Yes. Where just because I can doesn't mean I should, right? Or just because I have this tool doesn't mean I should do that thing. And that's not easy. I think it's natural for humans, right? To, okay, wow, I have this new G-Wiz thing. I want to use it to do X, Y, and Z. And oh my gosh, I can do A, B, C, and D too. And, and okay, that's part of the process, I think, is you go through some of that stuff and, okay, get it out of your system. And then, okay, let's focus on what really needs to happen. And I think not everybody gets to that. Let's focus on what really needs to happen to make this work. And sometimes it just snowballs and gets weird.
Yeah, you don't need to use all 8 colors in your crayon box. Like,
right.
Just pick a couple and run with them.
Yeah. I mean, with engineering, we have the, colloquialism thing that's like, sometimes you just have to shoot the engineer and get on with it, right? Like,
oh my gosh,
right?
yeah.
Or pencils down or whatever, right? Please step away, sir.
How many times I complain about our engineers, give them a rash of shit. I'm like, get out of here. You already came up with it. We're going to figure out how to make it.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, and then we come back, what is this tolerance again?
Yeah. Yeah. There's moderation is a healthy thing in all parts of life, right? Including this kind of stuff.
So to cap that whole idea, this is the best part, to the flip side of the coin. So there's a classic old story of, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Klotzlis out in Switzerland.
Yeah.
They talk about generations and legacy of making knives, but they're very good friends of ours. And HP and my dad and my folks have been very good friends. And their son, Samuel, is very good friends with me. And he's about my age. He's kind of the next one to take it on. So we're similar in that sense. Anyway, I believe when Klotzli first saw the Sebenza in the early 90s, he said something about, in his Swiss accent, like, what is this ugly thing? Because it's the sandblasted titanium handle that was like, okay. And so, we sit here and kind of like awe the old man of the simplicity. And it's like, the Swiss were like, the hell is this? So I guess it's all in the eye of the beholder. And HP didn't know at that point what it would turn on to be. And he's got great admiration for my old man, but it's just funny,
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of to Birch's point. It's an interesting to think about, right? There's like a chicken or the egg aspect of that. Did the industry come around to the Sebenza, right? Or did it, wow, how exactly did that happen? Right. Where I don't know that like you said, there's a whole segment of the industry back when the Sebenza started that wasn't about tactical and whatever, right? But maybe what happens is it leaves enough of an imprint that it kind of builds its own legacy, which is kind of weird to think about, but maybe that's the reality.
Something there. Yeah, I think you're onto something there. Yeah. Look, I mean, the frame lock, you put it in someone's hands and like 9 times out of 10, they're like, oh, I get it.
Right.
Like there's very few people, and I put a lot of frame locks in Sebenzas in people's hands that have never held one before. And a lot of people, and sometimes you just kind of have to say, hey, push that over. Oh, boom. But it's immediately like recognizable, the mechanism and stuff. And so it's kind of like many great things are like, duh. Why, you almost doubt yourself. You're like, it's so simple. Did I come up with something? Or is this just like, does everyone know this? So yeah, it's like you've fallen, you come across those, I think about like, say like the Rolling Stones, or like, I don't know, some of those classic rock bands that landed on some of these songs and at a particular time or whatever. And it set things in motion and inspired so many people. And it not necessarily that they were so complicated songs or technically proficient songs or whatever, but it's like that chord structure and how they did it just kind of fired it off. And it's tough for them to like go back and do that again. I mean, do you want the Rolling Stones to come up with the newest original song these days? I don't know. Am I rambling, or does that even make sense?
No, I get what you're saying. It's kind of like the zeitgeist of, is it because of it hit at that time and was sort of captured the moment, or was it because it could have hit any time? Who knows?
Right.
Yeah.
I guess who knows, right? Yeah. Yeah. So look, we're very fortunate, and we've obviously made our own careers, but many careers off of that basic idea and a thought process. And obviously Chris Reeve Knives is more than just the frame lock. Like I think we make a pretty dang good blade attached to it. And, you know, like we put a lot into that.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot around it, but it's nice when you have a couple of those things. I mean, the whole one-piece knife concept, that was something the old man brought to the knife industry too. And it's like, shoot, that's pretty simple, but yeah, that's cool. You know, it could be one piece. Well, yeah, hell yeah. And then thank God for Rambo, you know. I don't know if we'd be a company if it wasn't for Rambo getting chased off of a cliff. And I like Rambo. I don't want to knock the movie series, but it's not like what I watch all the time. But thank God for him. Right.
Yes.
I might be in the wrong demographic to talk too much shit on Rambo.
Yeah, well,
that wasn't an old guy book.
Whatever you say, pal.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. We've talked about Rambo once or twice on our show. Okay, whatever.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's so much history and legacy there, right?
I think that whole, it's like Birch said earlier, right? This is a blowing smoke thing, but there are a bunch of cultural cornerstone, icon, influence kind of things, right? Okay, we've had so many knife makers on that, you know, we'll ask about, you know, what's your favorite movie knife, stuff like that, right? And Rambo comes up almost every single time, right? Or Predator or Conan or, you know, there's like a very specific collection of things that were huge influences on people that are in the industry. And I think, you know, not to help you sweat it any more than you already do, but the Sebenza thing is one of those influences, right? And I think that's really cool. And it also gives you a bunch of custodianship responsibility, right? But but it is really cool, right? It's like it's one of those pieces in the puzzle that help define kind of the basis of the industry as it is today. And I think that's a really fun thing to recognize. And sometimes people, you know, we don't think about that stuff as often, but
sure.
I think if you step back, you kind of have to, you know, give a solid nod to that because it's real.
There's a boatload of frame locks in that Blade show when you show up. Like there's a lot of them in there, you know.
Yeah.
And people are doing amazing stuff with that basic concept. But no, I my personal point of view is I just feel honored to be in the middle of all of it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a huge honor to have you know, an old man like mine. And my mother, you can't keep her out of the picture.
Right.
We wouldn't have this company if it wasn't for her. I mean, holy cow.
Hey, Michael, write down we should have had Anna on instead.
Sure.
Put that in
What you guys need to do is just get her on here by herself. That'd be the best thing. Just let her go.
That would be fascinating.
You want to ask all those questions of like the nuances of the timeline. She's got it. Because, you know, I wasn't born when most of those things were happening. So I try and learn these because it's kind of my thing. It's kind of my gig. I should know these historical things. But no, she just knows so many cool little things. She's got great stories from back in the old days.
Another subtle old guy dig. We're not missing any of these, pal.
Hey, I just turned 30, so I'm starting to see the dents on the rig. And like things aren't working quite as well as they were before. So,
Right.
Coming around the corner.
Okay. Sean, you got something you want to hit?
Yeah. Okay, at this point, you guys have put a lot of knives out there.
Yeah.
And I just want to know what's some of the weirdest shit you've seen come back for warranty.
That's a great
Wait, let me load another roll of tape on the machine.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen almost everything. It seems like a lot of like the typical one for blades is like somebody. I would say they fell asleep on a buffing wheel, and just buffed the entire thing into oblivion, and then they're like, oh, can you fix it? There's not a lot left to fix, you know.
Right. Yeah, we can put a new blade in it.
Yeah, a lot of, you know, broken in halves, things like that, and then you always get the funny range of like, so you're gonna fix it for free, right? Or like, hey, what does it cost to get? You know, whatever it takes to get a new one on here for us, and we try and take care of our customers. I think we have a pretty good warranty. It's like if you're not stupid, you know, we'll take care of you for the most part. So one of the cool ones, I'll tell you, I'll say this. So we make a knife called the Green Beret knife, and there's a sister version called the Yarborough knife, which is the exact same knife, just the Yarborough knife has a Yarborough engraved in it with a serial number. And those are issued to every, graduating soldier out of Q course for the Special Forces Green Berets. Huge honor, actually, for us. We've been doing this for 20 years now. huge honor for us to be involved with. So we get some pretty cool stories coming back, and some stories that aren't like allowed to be told to us. Okay, cool. I'm trust that you poked a bad guy or something. Generally, we don't hear a lot of like killing people stories, which I guess on one hand is pretty good.
Right.
It's a tool. Like, we've never really advertised our knives as weapons. I guess my folks have never thought of them as weapons, I guess. But we had one. So a soldier sent in a knife and said, hey, I just need a new one. What does it cost to get a new one? And he sent it in and he said, I can't tell you really the whole story, but essentially we're on a house raid, and the tech guys, whoever those guys are, and I'm not good at military speak. But anyway, the guys that like are in charge of killing the power to the house and like the surrounding neighborhood didn't do that. Something went wrong, and they're about to go pop into this house, and it needs to be dark. So he cut a live power line with the knife. It's a 7-inch blade. Yeah. 7-inch blade. About halfway up, there's like a big D shape, like burn mark, exploded, melted steel, just toast, right? And my mom basically said, we've got a new one on your way. Like, you're a soldier. We're not going to make you pay for another one of these. So we turned another one around as fast as possible. And she basically said, hey, look, whatever you're doing that you needed to cut a live wire that badly, like, I'm sure it was good stuff. But that was kind of the story that we got. That was a pretty good one.
Wow.
Yeah. I can't think of too many wild ones. You get some stuff. Guys go crazy with the Dremel tool, or it's tough. Like with, I don't know, we've heard probably too many stories of like work sharps gobbling up blades, and they're great systems, and the guys do a very good job designing them. But I think too many people don't start with butter knives or, something a little more consumable. So we get a lot of those, like, oh my God, my Sebenza got eaten by my work sharp. What can he do? And like, well, we'll do what we can, or $150, we can get a new blade on there for you, Yeah. So I can't remember. I'll tell you this. It's not necessarily something somebody did to the blade, but we had a customer insist in sending in a video of, he was so excited about his single blade. So it's kind of like a worn cliff sheep's foot type blade that we do. And he loved it so much on his Sebenza that he sent a video of him shaving his girlfriend's leg hair.
Oh my gosh.
What?
Oh boy.
Wow.
So he had a good laugh and was like, God, thank you, man. Thanks for sending that in. I think we even took a screenshot of it and like hung it up on the wall in the office. It's like,
wow.
I'm sure he wasn't kind of feeling you out, seeing if you were into it.
Yeah,
maybe they'll buy you a drink.
I'm not sure any of us in the front office were really into it.
Oh, so much the better.
There's more where that came from, buddy.
Oh yeah, we've got great fans. Like, you know how it is in this knife world. There's a certain percentage of nerd in all of us. And to greater and lesser degrees.
True fact.
Yeah, so you get some wild stuff kind of come back. You're like, wait, what? Like, normal people do this?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the cool things, and this is probably worth pointing out too, and I think some people know this already, obviously, but the fact that you guys are making the same knife, right, in a few forms over the years, a little bit of evolution, but the ability for you to be able to swap in a blade, I assume recut a lock, and boom, the guy's back on the road.
Relatively easily, yeah. Yeah, there's a level of discontinuation that's always tough. That's built into progressing models, right? For example, like the Sebenza 21 is the longest produced knife we've ever made, and then we've recently in 2019 we brought out the Sebenza 31. Because of the slight change in how the lock interface worked, I had to move the detent ball on the not the detent ball, but the detent hole location on the blade. Outside of that, a 21 and a 31 blade are identical, but I have to move that detent location, to make it all work. So there's some things that aren't retrofittable, but like I could cut the lock to it. It's just not going to work in the detent, right?
Right.
And then there's some things you just get so far back versions of the knife that like I can't get an original blade. So you get into like the minutia and nuance of what you have to build into a warranty kind of document, and we've kind of, that's a living document throughout times. But what's pretty dang cool is we can almost make anything work, which is pretty cool. But we do have to have some limits put in.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
So, you live in Idaho, and I would love to live in Idaho, but that's probably never going to happen. But how's the fishing up there? I mean, do you do any fishing or hunting or any of that stuff?
It's all terrible. The mountains are real flat. The rivers are dry.
Don't come.
Yeah, it's
That
just
makes me feel
smoke
better,
all
at
the
least.
time. Yeah. No, it's sadly it's just amazing. So I live an hour outside of town, 40 miles out, and 27 miles of it is a dirt road that follows the South Fork of the Boise Canyon. So when I go to work, I drop 2,000 feet in elevation and go from 0 to 100 miles an hour. And I love it. I can get my brain straight before I get to the shop and get my brain straight before I get home. And I follow a trophy section of the South Fork of the Boise. And all that means is that they just make the regs really strict. And so it's like 2 trout over 20 inches, barbless, a single hook, barbless, that kind of stuff.
Now, is that like going straight north out of town?
It's straight east, actually.
Okay.
North gets you up into McCall, and I mean, you can go almost any direction out of Boise, and you're going to run into all the above. I mean, if you go south, you get into high desert. You go north, you get up into trees and mountains. But yeah, McCall area is very famous, and you have all the lakes, Payette Lake and what is that, Lake Cascade and the Payette River and all that. But the Boise River actually flows right through town, which is pretty cool. And the university, Boise State University, is right on the river. So it's a beautiful campus. There's loads of great fishing holes in Boise. I mean, there's times where like we've gone fishing on our lunch break or right after work, things like that. But yeah, so I live on the South Fork they all feed together and then finally hit Boise. So I always joke and I have a creek that goes through my backyard that it's called Smith Creek that goes into the South Fork. And I always joke like I could pee in my creek and it would end up like going through the university. It's like a great way to think about it. The water flows downhill.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, hunting is great. So I felt good about myself because I caught 2 12-inch rainbows this weekend, and I was like, oh my God, I can actually catch fish. This is great. And I actually caught one of them on a fly that Bill Harsey tied for me. So he couldn't make it to Blade Show, and I think his way of sitting on his hands, quote unquote, sitting on his hands, which is not getting on the internet through Blade Show, was he tied me a whole box of flies, which is just super cool. And he can tie a guide level fly.
Nice.
So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
And yeah, hunting opportunities are great, elk and deer and all that kind of stuff. And I've kind of actually started, my wife Marissa and I, we just dove into the hunting world over the last couple of years. I didn't grow up hunting, which is funny. Being in Idaho, being in knives and growing up around guns and stuff. I grew up shooting guns and all that. I didn't grow up hunting. Chris is not a hunter. He's not against it. He's a big animal lover. He's like, look, I'll make the knife, sharpen the knife. I'll help you cook and eat the meat, but I don't really want to have a part with like killing the animal. And
yeah,
but he never had anything against it. You know, all of our friends would go. He loved shooting rifles and all that kind of stuff. So we just kind of fell head over heels with it. And it started from this road that I drive on every day. And I cross a bridge, which starts this trophy section of a trout river. And so I thought, hey, well, let me get a rod. And I ended up getting a fly rod instead of a spin rod. So I've been doing that for a couple of years. And then I just got my first spin rod recently. I'm like, oh my God, I'm learning how to be a spin fisherman. Like there's like 6-year-olds on the river next to me that are like way better at it than me. Whatever, man. I'm just gonna keep going, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I shot my first deer this last October. And that was a really cool experience and got to use one of our knives and actually upcoming skinning knife. And it worked pretty dang well. And I just love the experience. It's super cool. It was super fun. And now I'm hooked and I'm trying to shoot any critter that I can legally shoot.
Nice. Yeah.
So yeah, it's beautiful country up here. So you guys need to come visit. Please do.
Yeah. I watched on your Instagram, you're always posting some beautiful, beautiful spots. And clearly you and your wife love a good adventure, even if it's local. And that's really cool to see.
Yeah, lots of places to play up here.
Yeah.
Yeah. My solace is a dirt road and a pickup.
Yeah.
Like I just love that. And I drive fast. But that's another genetic thing.
Drift
right.
around the corners.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no, so I grew up, my dad had and we still have it. It's an F350 it's a Triton V10 gas, long bed, long box, like the biggest truck you can get from Ford without getting into a different license probably. And at 14 years old, I could parallel park it and reverse and tow trailers and do all that kind of stuff. But my prize was like, I knew how to control a four-wheeled controlled slide on any corner up in like my neck of the woods on all these logging roads and dirt roads, before I even knew how like the traffic lights really worked. So
Yes.
in my driving test, I was like number 2 best. The only other kid, he was like the super nerdy smart kid that beat me because he knew the book better. So I was second best in the class on the driving side, but I almost flunked driver's ed because of the written homework side. I had to do a bunch of extra credit to actually get a passing grade. So,
Oh boy.
if that doesn't define me, then I don't know what. Like, it's pretty good insight to me and my priorities.
Right.
So yeah.
Very cool.
Excellent.
Tim, it's been great to have you with us. I think a really interesting conversation, some cool history, some nice insights in your involvement and how you kind of came full circle and back into the business. And we appreciate you taking the time, man.
Oh, thanks for having me. That's great. I love it.
All right. Well, we have a few field trips that are on our list, and coming out there to Boise's one of them.
Please come see us. And,
We added it to the list just while we were talking.
Good. No, I'd love to have you guys up. Come stay with us. We got 3 queen beds upstairs. It's not hard, and show you the whole shop and the whole endeavor. And Boise's just a great place. And so, yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. This is you guys have a very good thing going here. It's the knife community needs a good podcast like this that brings a good lot of different angles in, and it's a good I'm trying to say, like a good platform or a good little space that you get to learn about lots of different people. I got to know more about Chad Nichols or it's like I'd known Chad for a long time.
Yeah.
And I learned like a whole pile more about him, just on this podcast. Right. So no, keep it up. I think it's only an improvement to our industry, what you guys are doing. So keep it up.
And we really appreciate those words. Yeah. We've been trying to do exactly that, help people tell their story. And it's oftentimes, I would say almost every time, a much deeper version of the story than you can get over a bunch of beers in the pit. Right. So the goal is that the conversation should have that feel like we're in the pit, right? Where it's just comfortable and shooting the shit. Right. And at the same time, let's dig into things a little bit. And, that's a luxury. Occasionally we have someone complain about the length of the show, but it's like, well, that's how the conversation goes, man. We don't force them to go long. They just go long because we're having a good chat, and that's fun.
I like it. I'm a long podcast listener. Like I see 3 hours. I'm like, yeah, baby, let's do this. Like I love the Joe Rogan format, right? And,
Yep.
I listen to a handful of other guys that have kind of longer form, and I get, everyone's got their different show, and then I'm also, I can talk for a little while. So that works out. like our little podcast, I 3 hours pretty easily. And they could have used some direction, and maybe if we get back onto it, we'll get a little more direction, a little more concise. But I like putting time limits on things, especially when you're having good conversations. So this has been great. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, as always, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, thanks to our Patreon folks. Thanks for sticking with us. I don't know. Do you guys have anything else that we need to hit before we wrap this thing up?
I think so.
I don't think so.
No, I'm solid.
All right, man. Well, that was easy then. One of the things we've mentioned a couple of times is it's been really a blessing for us to have the ability to do this show even through COVID and lockdown and all this other stuff that's happened over the last year and a half or two. And, we can kind of keep rolling with it and stay in touch with one another. So it's like the show thing's such a huge piece of what this is all about for a lot of us. And not having that for a while felt very strange. So this has been our lifeline for knife dork conversations. So
yeah, thank God for the rise of podcasts, because you hit COVID and if you can't go to another random hotel ballroom to eat weird food and talk knives, then I don't know how this industry will work.
Right. How do we keep the wheels on?
God, I used to get sick of celery sticks and stuff. These shows, Like that's all you can get is grape tomatoes and celery sticks.
Right.
So no, this has been great that you guys, there's some other guys that are doing some great stuff too. And I hope it's cool to see all the different flavors, right? And so you get different stuff that drums up. And no, and when I say that you guys have the most mature podcast, I do mean that as a genuine compliment. It brings a different vibe, and it brings I think, better quality content.
We appreciate that, man. Thank you.
Yeah, totally.
In a very backhanded way. We got
I got a great front and backhand here.
We feel you, fam.
I gotta find my wheelchair or walker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, put some new tennis balls in that thing, Tom. You're going to scratch the floor.
Yeah.
I know a handful of folks in the industry are amazed at seeing me get my first couple of gray hairs because, like, I went to my first knife show at 7 weeks old. And was passed around like, we got to sell a knife. They kind of like passed me off to like, somebody and another grandmother or something. And so I have all these kind of quote unquote old, knife industry grandmothers and grandfathers. And
Absolutely.
I can't tell you how many times, I mean, even at this last Blade show, it's like, oh my gosh, Tim, you're good. I haven't seen you since you were this, tiny. And it's like, I know it's tough for a lot of those folks to see it. And it's weird for me to go into Blade show and be like, who the hell are all these companies?
Yeah.
But it's cool. It's good to see. I mean, it'd be better than 30 years and things haven't changed.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that stuff is the beauty of it, right? When you're around the scene for a long time, the importance of this whole, it gets thrown around a lot, right? But knife community thing, It means something different once you've been around it for a while. So
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's true.
Whole different vibe.
You love it and hate it all together.
It's the most beautiful dysfunctional family going. Yep.
So cool.
All right. Awesome, man. Well, thanks again for taking the time to join us, and we'll talk to everybody next time.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, bud.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thanks for listening, folks.
Cheers, everybody.
To learn more about our makers, you can find Tom Crine on the web at crineknives.net, in his Facebook group, Crine Knives, or in his Instagram account, at Crine Knives. For Michael Birch, check birchtreeblades.com, Facebook group Birch Tree Blade Works, or Michael's Instagram at birchtreeblades. For myself and the Raygun Bead Project, we're on the web at raygundivision.com. We have a Facebook group called Raygun Division, or my personal Instagram, at msteiner. For those interested in photos, references from the show, or some discussion about the show itself, you can find us on the web at markofthemaker.com, in a Facebook group called Mark of the Maker, or on our Instagram, at Mark of the Maker. Last but not least, the ultra cool and haunting background music we use for the show is a piece called Noir Guitar by Stevie's Amp Shack, found at the Free Music Archive and licensed under Creative Commons CC BY 4.0. Thanks for listening.